This is a bit of an informative session on the ins and outs of moving to Spain. We've got myself advising, specialising in expatriate advice. Jacob's joined us, and one of my colleagues, US specialist advisor, Venetia. A quick hello from yourself up in Murcia, is it?
Hi, hello, thank you for coming today. I'm Venetia, I'm the owner of Expats. Started off as a UK accountant. When I moved over to Spain, I adapted to the Spanish way of working, doing NLVs, EU residencies, just helping people generally if they need any help or information while they came into Spain.
Thanks for joining, Venetia. Really appreciate the time. Jacob, good to see you.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Remy. Yeah, as Remy mentioned, I am the U.S. expat investment specialist. As a U.S. expat myself, living here on the Costa del Sol, I understand a lot of the challenges, and I've been a financial advisor for a little over a decade now, mostly back in the States. I'm originally from Portland, Oregon, so excited to share. My part is going to focus a little bit on the common pitfalls I see U.S. expats make during the transition. So look forward to sharing those with you here in just a minute.
You're a busy man at the moment, Jacob. A lot of traffic since November 2024. Venetia, probably yourself.
It
Yeah,
has been
and
a
we're
little
busy with a
crazy.
lot of taxes.
There you go. I'll give you guys a quick sort of insight into Holborn assets. So myself and Jacob, being senior wealth managers for Holborn, company's been around since 1998. We're one of the largest wealth management companies globally. We operate in over 150 countries. We're licensed and regulated to give advice in every jurisdiction we operate in. We're based out of the Spanish office ourselves on the south coast in sunny Marbella, Malaga area. And predominantly we specialise in giving advice on savings, investments, retirements, pensions, tax planning. The scope of advice we can give is quite vast, and albeit we're a large company, we're an independent company. We're family owned. We have around 4 billion of assets under management. Myself and Jacob certainly don't look after all of that, but look, we have 20,000 clients globally, and we're a highly reputable company, and we're sort of not going anywhere. Me and Jacob, as you might be able to tell, we're senior wealth managers, but we're reasonably young. So big point of that is we'd like to create long, ongoing relationships with clients. We're not just a brokerage company. We don't just set up an investment legal service. And generally, we speak to clients throughout the year, especially in the Middle East. I think I might have missed myself there. Again, I'm a qualified financial advisor from the UK myself. Grew up in Cambridge. And guys, also an important point, we have a question and answers tab. So you'll see that in the top right of your screen, I believe. It's a button. Please feel free to use that whenever you want. We'll end the session with a bit of a Q&A. There'll be links to all of our diaries for any one-on-one conversations you want to have following the meeting. So lovely slide here on why do you want to move to Spain. None of us are associated with the Spanish tourism boards, but I think there's probably a reason you're joining this webinar, and it's pretty self-explanatory. We've just come off the back of a few weeks of rain, which is very strange for March, April time. The sun's back out. The temperature's 23 degrees, I think, today. But yeah, 300 days of sunshine. Cost of living is a big one. Now, this webinar generally is aimed at anyone moving to Spain. Most inquiries, obviously, we're getting at the moment are from the US and the UK. So we'll focus generally on clients from the UK, Ireland, and the US. But yeah, big point is lower cost of living. We're just having a conversation about that. Cost of healthcare, cost of details around why moving to Spain is appealing. Probably more reasons why leaving your country at the moment, but we'll touch on tax and residency. Now, just to be very clear, myself, Jacob, and Venetia aren't qualified tax advisors. We certainly can point you in the right direction to cross-border tax accountants, and Venetia and her team can help with the ongoing tax reporting in Spain. But just to give you a quick idea of some things to be mindful of and some important dates and actions potentially to take as far as the pre-planning tax planning. Tax year is different in Spain. It's calendar year, so January 1st and 31st. Unlike the US, unlike the UK, why is that important? Well, when it comes to potentially selling houses or liquidating assets, for example, the timing is important. So there's lots of reasons why you become a tax resident. Main one being the 183-day rule. Spending over 183 days during the calendar year does classify you as a Spanish tax resident. Obviously, there's things as fiscal residency, area of work, for example, but that'll pretty much tick the box. And again, something to be mindful of, especially around selling houses. We've just had these conversations with clients around moving in June, July. We would recommend, if it's feasible, to try and push that date to at least the 1st of July. If you're going to sell your house, ideally do it this year. If we're talking 2025 as an example, Spanish tax year ends at 31st of December, you're then going to become a Spanish tax resident as of the 1st of January in Spain in 2026. Now, if you didn't sell your house, for example, this year, and you sold it next year, albeit you wouldn't be eligible for capital gains tax in the UK, the Spanish Hacienda could and would still make you liable for the tax in Spain. So important to have a bit of planning, as well as stuff like pensions. You have a tax-free allowance in certain jurisdictions, maybe tax-free allowance in your current country of residence. Once you're in Spain, they're going to tax you on your worldwide income. So it's important to do any tax beneficial movements prior to becoming a Spanish tax resident. Again, tax reporting is nothing we specialize in. We can assist with the tax efficient structuring of your assets and the ongoing support and advice, but from a tax reporting point of view, we'd certainly recommend speaking with a local expert. Now, first point of call moving to Spain. How do you get in the country? Now, for me, moving 7 years ago as a British guy was a little bit easier, perhaps, than it is today. I won't say the B word, but we have some options, I guess, available. Now, Venetia, obviously, with Expats, is what you fully specialise in. I think you mentioned doing 1,000 NLV applications last year.
Oh, yeah, last year, yeah, we did quite a few of them. It's starting to pick up again this year, again because people want to come in and avoid the tax year this year, so they'll sell their houses and get themselves prepared, maybe talk to you before they make any big decisions, and then they'll miss the tax year for this year as well too.
There you go. So give us a bit of an insight into an NLV and why people would use the non-lucrative visa, and who are they for?
The NLV are for people who decide they either wish to retire into Spain, or for some reason they want a year out. They don't have to renew if they come on the NLV. They can just take a year out, 12 months. This is why when you go for the initial appointment, they're only interested in that 1 year, first of all, and if you can support yourself and you've got your health insurance and everything. After that, it's different. It's if you intend to extend it. But initially, they just want that full 12 months, because people do sometimes decide, we just want a year out, see what it's like, and then go back home. So they can do that as well. It's a good way of finding out if Spain's for you, I suppose, trying it for 12 months. And then if it is, you can use a renewal for 2 years and then another 2 years until it makes you a 5-year permanent resident.
So that's the process, right? Speak to you, arrange the NLV, you will deal and process the renewals, year 2, 3, 5, until that residency status, right? Venetia, I think we've frozen.
Yeah, I think I didn't get what you said then.
You'll help people along. You'll help people along the way from initial NLV application to the renewals.
Yeah, we do it from start to finish. If they want to come in, we'll get them in from the home countries. Then we help them with the TIEs once they're here. We help them with renewals, tax returns. We advise on financial advice. Yeah, basically we can do a lot, and we've got people along the way. You can also offer help and assist people with things they need.
like us, I think you mentioned financial advice, certainly where we can help. And look, guys, there's certain ways to structure your assets to help with those renewals. And obviously, the income or savings requirements are changing. Currently, 28,800 per year, moving up as of 2025 shortly, I think. Similar with the additional dependents. But again, we can help structure assets or investments or savings to tick the boxes for any renewals moving. Again, having a bit of pre-planning prior to the move allows us to assist and overview the current arrangements. Now, alternative to the NLV, Venetia, you pretty much specialise in the NLV, but between us, there's certainly partners or immigration lawyers that can assist with the digital nomad visa, for example, self-employed visa, and it's more aimed at people planning to continue working compared to the non-lucrative visa. It's quite specific on the ability not to work. We're here to help and provide contacts to get you whatever visa is necessary. But Venetia, right in saying that it's worth having a conversation with you initially to see what some of the situations like.
Certainly, yeah. If they get in touch, we can have they can explain to me what they're interested in, what they want to know about, and I can reply with a suitable answer for them and offer further advice and maybe someone who could help them out if I can't do it. No problem at all.
Okay. Well, we'll split the financial advice section into two parts. As we mentioned at the start of the call, you probably tell by my accent, I'm from the UK myself. I grew up in Cambridge. And quite simply, I specialise in British expats in Spain and France. My two main areas of specialty, and it's looking after clients, having a good understanding of how the UK sort of framework and products and vehicles work, and basically alternatives in Spain. We're an expatriate advisory firm. So from a UK perspective, again, we have to differentiate from UK clients and US clients. Jacob will touch on US clients and how perhaps it's more beneficial to leave the structures as they are compared to the UK, where a UK ISA, albeit maybe tax efficient and beneficial in the UK, once you leave, it holds no benefit. Similar to a premium bond, similar to private and occupational pensions. And essentially, that's where we come in as expatriate financial advisors. For Spain, all we're doing is looking at alternative vehicles to a UK ISA for savings or investment, or alternative pension solutions for your current UK pensions. Now, at the end of the day, all we're trying to do is get a tax-efficient wrapper or structure to allow you to take an income, to pass on monies, to allow it to grow in a tax-efficient way. Again, similar to an ISA, a Spanish tax-compliant bond, for example, is a perfect wealth structuring tool. What we put into that tool, again, that's completely dependent on situational objectives and risk tolerance and income requirements. But that's the purpose of a one-on-one consultation for us to look at that in more detail. But essentially, having UK ISAs and UK pensions and premium bonds hold no benefit once you remove yourself from the UK as a UK tax resident. And there's certainly steps to take as far as planning the move to Spain, from a financial planning perspective. And that's what we're here to do. We can provide that support, that initial advice. And again, we provide an ongoing service to continue that. So this is specific to different people's needs. So, after the initial consultation, we'll get an idea of your situation, the idea of your assets, the idea of where you want to be moving forward. And we'll give you a bespoke, personalized investment recommendation, solely for you. And we'll get a chance to run through that. But it touches on capital gains tax. Again, we look at sort of tax efficient vehicles, right? We're trying to wrap up the money. So it's only a tax when you take money from the vehicle, tax at a very favorable rate, only on the gain element. And again, money's being passed on to your loved ones in an easy tax efficient manner. For UK clients especially, the real estate investment options there as UK clients is phenomenal. The yields producing and the capital appreciation property investments, we have a property investment arm to our company. There's certainly some great options there. Again, for US and UK residents, the bond market, especially in the UK, is very attractive. And there's some really good property bonds, short-term bonds offering, 10, 12% a year. So there's other ways to generate a return. And then once you're in Spain, from a UK perspective, we can always look at changing the ISAs or looking at alternative pension solutions. I think I've got a slide on this. So when it comes to pensions, generally UK state pension, there's nothing you can do. They're locked in. You will still receive that. There is a double tax agreement between Spain and the UK. You will have to declare both, but you're not going to pay both. When it comes to occupational pensions, defined contributions, defined benefits, private pensions, self-invested SIPs, there's alternative options. And that's where our pension transfer specialist team can provide advice. Now, gone are the days of overseas transfers from the UK. There's a 25% overseas tax charge now. Very bad advice to do that. Anyone giving you that advice, I'd second guess their regulation. But as far as that, we can look at alternatives. And the goal there is trying to get more control and flexibility over the pension, more currency flexibility, but to provide that ongoing support and advice from an overseas perspective. If you move back to the UK, great. If you move back to France, US, wherever it is, we as a company can provide that ongoing advice. Big one, I guess, for the pensions is the tax-free lump sum. You know, everyone at the age of 50, generally all work and private pensions, has the ability to take a 25% tax-free lump sum. You can only get this as a UK tax resident. If you move to Spain, as I mentioned earlier, during that calendar year, you will be taxed in Spain on your worldwide income, your worldwide assets. So it's recommendable to do that as a UK tax resident. And look, the timing is important on that, but we recommend everyone take that. If you are planning to move, you've planned to move back to the UK in a few years, there's no real need, but worth having a conversation to see what the best way around it is and make sure you're set up in the best way. I think that pretty much covers the UK side of things. Again, to differentiate, the advice is quite different, Jacob, right? So we're going to touch on US retirement accounts and investment.
Yeah. So hello, everyone. As Remy mentioned, I'm the US expat investment specialist. Yeah, since November, I think the latest stat I saw was we've had a 400% increase of Americans moving to the EU, and particularly Spain and Portugal as well. But yeah, understanding your investments and how to keep some of the advantages of retirement accounts in line with both American and Spanish taxes can be pretty important for the financial plan. Even though your cost of living probably just decreased, your taxes from your investment income are more likely to increase under the Spanish system. So like I mentioned earlier, I'm going to use my time here today to talk about some of the common pitfalls I see Americans make when they move to Spain. Certainly happy to speak about individual scenarios during one-on-one consultations where at the end, Remy will show some QR codes to be able to book directly into our calendars to kind of take a look at those scenarios. Also, feel free. It seems people have been a bit shy. We got quite a few of you here, but feel free to use that Q&A button. Last time, I think Remy and I answered, it was 25 questions and had plenty more that we weren't even able to get to. So yeah, feel free to, don't be shy there.
It is 6:30 in the afternoon, Jacob, and I have been in the office since 8. No, I'm joking. Can continue.
Yeah, that is fair. It is getting a little later here, so maybe Remy will be getting home a little earlier than 8 o'clock tonight. But yeah, let's kind of start with the 401k plans, right? A cornerstone of many Americans' retirement strategies. And I don't have the time today to get into every detail about American retirement plans, but I do actually host a monthly webinar speaking about some of the general strategies with those. One mistake I see Americans make often is roll over multiple plans within the same 12-month period to an IRA, which, yeah, it does give you a broader range of investment choices, but doing multiple of these per the same account type in a 12-month period can be viewed as a distribution and also has some extra penalties, particularly if you are younger than 59 and a half. So definitely essential to work with a provider who understands some of that timing issues, as well as speaking to your CPA before making any of these big leaps. Your CPA will also appreciate making sure that, well, your Spanish tax advisor as well, that you're working with an institution that will provide both tax documents to both locations, as opposed to just that 1099-R from an IRA distribution. Speaking of distributions, Roth IRAs here in Spain are not tax-free anymore. So a couple different strategies that you can approach this as. One is the year before being a Spanish tax resident, take that full distribution if you're planning on living in Spain or really the rest of the EU for the rest of your life, taking that distribution the year before you're a Spanish tax resident. Remy mentioned that timing of being a Spanish tax resident. So if you're only here the first year for under 183 days, that can still be a great time to take that. If you do think that you're going to be moving back to America before taking these distributions, no need to do that, or at some point in time, as long as you're not needing to take any of these Roth distributions. In the meantime, as far as taxation, you see a lot of different things online. The best advice I've gotten from Spanish tax attorneys is that the gains in the Roth accounts are essentially taxed as a capital gain upon those distributions that you're taking. And so certainly less advantageous than a tax-free distribution as you're an American tax resident. So certainly something to keep in mind. Remy also mentioned capital gains as far as selling a house can be incredibly important for American married couples, particularly when we're looking at a full 500,000 of capital gains exclusion that you lose when you are a Spanish tax resident. So certainly something to keep in mind.
We're not telling people just to sell their house, right? We're not here to do that. But if it's a consideration, then the timing is important, right?
Right. And a lot of Americans are also really counting on that depreciation expense that we have in the United States in order to lower that taxable income from rental properties. And so it might not necessarily be as advantageous to rent your house out when you're living in Spain that you were really thinking. And so definitely, make sure that you're factoring in not taking that depreciation expense every year into that taxable income. Kind of going back to retirement accounts, though, it's definitely important that you keep your retirement accounts custodied in the United States. I have seen different providers out there offering offshore IRAs, and for Americans, it simply isn't true. Particularly right now, there's so many Americans who are asking about moving assets outside of the States. And that's certainly something that we can help with. There's all sorts of different rules and regulations we want to make sure to follow as we're doing that. But for your retirement account assets, we really need to keep that back in the States in order to keep those tax structures, keep that deferred capital gains, which can certainly increase, the compound growth that you see over time, particularly when you're moving into Spanish capital gains tax. It can also be tempting to potentially use a U.S. address to maintain relationships with U.S. financial institutions as you're living abroad, but that approach definitely carries some significant risks. If discovered, it could be seen as fraud, potentially resulting in the forced liquidation of your assets, which, particularly if you have high unrealized capital gains or large retirement assets, can be pretty devastating to the full financial plan. So definitely want to be transparent about your residency status with your financial institution just to avoid any complications that could arise from that misrepresentation. Some institutions will freeze the account potentially when they discover you're living abroad, or again, even force distribution after a certain amount of time. Typically, right, that's where we can come in, where we are able to use your new Spanish address, even as we are able to maintain that active management within the States. Certainly a strength of our dual licensing. Trusts are also a huge pitfall that I see for Americans who are really expecting trusts to be the end all be all for tax planning or for estate planning. And Spanish government disregards trusts. And so unless it is a irrevocable family trust, for example, where you're not necessarily in control of that, maybe you have a corporate trustee, those are certainly situations that can work. But we certainly want to speak to a Spanish estate planning attorney in order to solidify that and make sure that your US trust is going to be compatible with what you actually had in mind of the purpose of that, because they can be potentially expensive to set up and to maintain. So certainly want to make sure that we are keeping in line with some of those Spanish laws. Right now, in particular, currency considerations are huge too. We are seeing the US dollar pop up and down against the euro. If you are planning on buying a property, it just got 5% more expensive over the last week and a half. If you already are under contract for this property, you now have to come up with more cash. But definitely some ways to avoid this. One is a forward contract. We work with some excellent currency partners that can really show you how to do this in a cost-effective manner, do those foreign exchange, and again, getting some of the best rates available, even on an institutional level, and lock in your future exchange rates so that if you are buying a property, you can really plan about how much that is going to be, as opposed to another round of tariffs that get thrown on next week, and all of a sudden your own house is going to be more expensive than what you're originally planning. So that's, even creating a plan around currency for fixed income, where, large Social Security, VA, disability, right? All of these, if you're planning on living on that, we don't necessarily want your expenses over the next year to really have to increase. One way that we're actually also increasing some of this fixed income and creating a guaranteed stream is getting an annuity set up before you actually make the move. And so that's something that we've certainly helped a lot of Americans over the past month, wouldn't you say, Remy, that are a little bit scared of the fluctuations in the market. And we're able to really help plan around that and lower your overall financial planning risk while providing a guaranteed income, which can also be great for the NLV and qualifying for that.
I was going to say, we already had a couple of questions and a few pre-webinar. I get a lot of British expats asking about annuities, if they're any good, what are the options. That from a European UK point of view, I'm fascinated by the US annuity options at the moment, because an annuity gives you that zero downside risk, gives you that fixed income for life. Great, it sounds good. But from a British point of view, or Spanish, for example, that those annuity rates are terrible for starters, generally quite expensive, and they die with you. So I've seen some proposals you've sent to family, friends, Jacob, and the options available from a US point of view are compared to a market-based investment, we're not getting away from that, right? That's what we do on a day-to-day basis. But if you're offering someone the idea of zero downside risk, fixed income for life, including death benefits, I think some of them had some really interesting bonus allocations. I mean, they're worth exploring for a starter, right? And worth, they have to be specific for the right person, right?
Definitely. And it's a good time for them, with interest rates being higher in the United States, right? And back in 2020, when interest rates were practically zero, annuities didn't make sense. Now, with the interest rates being a little bit higher, before they might start getting cut here in the near future, particularly as we see some extra volatility in the stock market, where they might not be necessarily as attractive in a year. But for now, they certainly have a great place for many Americans before they move abroad. One example that Remy was just starting to give there is one of the annuities where it's fully invested in the S&P 500, but it has a 0% floor as the downside, but we still get 85% of the upside in the S&P 500. So it acts as more of a structured product as opposed to an annuity, although at any point in time, we can throw on 5% of that entire value for guaranteed income for life. So particularly in volatile climates like what we've been seeing, it can certainly provide a great peace of mind, particularly when you're on a new big adventure out in Spain. So it's one less thing to worry about. But yeah, with that, Remy, I'll go ahead and pass it back.
Okay. No, really interesting. And I sometimes put myself in my parents' shoes, and if I had $1 million in a retirement account and I saw what was going on in the markets and was quite nervous, it just seems to tick all the boxes as far as safety, security, zero downside risk always sounds nice to me. And albeit I'm sure, Jacob, I'm aware of your portfolio, but we're quite adventurous. We're in our 30s. It's quite the opposite with our clients, right? Any objectives that a client had, the first and foremost is client protection and safety and security. We're as boring as it gets when it comes to advisors, and it comes down to personal risk tolerance. But we're going to generally, in today's world, point you in that direction of how can we lower the risk mandate? How can we generate secure and fixed income? I touched on earlier in the call. For a short-term perspective, there's some really attractive bonds available, especially for clients in the US who have a lot of exposure to US dollars. They want to start receiving an income in euros. The UK bonds offering 10% a year on a 2-year basis is pretty attractive. Similarly, UK clients, sterling available, dollars, euros, they can be set up wherever you are in the world, and they're portable. Tax isn't withheld at source, but again, they have to be dependent on someone's situation if they're right for everyone. But that's the purpose of our sort of follow-up meetings, right? What should I do? It's a great question. Speak to us. Now, Venetia in the same boat. We certainly don't charge to have conversations. We don't charge for webinars. It's all very free, isn't it? We are a business, though. We as a Holborn Assets do get paid. And look, we are very transparent with our fees, and there's various ways in which we're remunerated, either directly from clients or directly from where the business is placed. That comes down to matching the right vehicle or instrument with someone's situation, risk tolerance, income requirements, and so on. But initially, have a conversation. We'll go through a full fact-finding process, what we call it. Work out how you have your assets arranged, what your plans are, what the situation looks like, what your risk tolerance looks like, what your income needs are, and we'll go away and put together a financial plan, a suitability report, and we'll send that to you via email. Again, without cost, without obligation. We're not a pushy company. We don't sell stuff. We're financial planners, and we're happy to have these initial conversations to see if we can help. And if we can fit in, great. We'll get a chance to run through the advice step by step, making sure you're sort of comfortable and happy. And look, given the size of the company, we're a very reputable organisation, as our XPay. You do as much due diligence as you want on myself, Jacob, as qualified financial advisors, as a company, whatever we recommend. But initially, scan these barcodes. So just to be clear, Remy Hart's diary there. If you're outside of the US, it doesn't matter where you are. I've focused a lot on UK and US, but if you're in Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Thailand, we still can help and we can still have a conversation. So get your phones out, take a picture. Jacob's diary there, that's for anyone US connected. If you're in Spain already or planning the move, still in the US, get the conversation started. We'll see if we can help. But obviously, everyone needs a visa. Unless you're lucky enough to somehow find an Irish passport, or if you've made your way through that queue at the Irish embassy, speak to Venetia, get the ball rolling on what options will be looking like for you. Yeah. So any comments, Venetia, Jacob, before we move on to a few some questions?
No, it just if they've got any questions at all, or they want to have a look through the website, just give us a message, email. We're happy to chat and arrange a meeting if they want one, or answering an email. It's all okay.
Perfect. So with a few questions about currency, Jacob, you touched on that quite well. It's a volatile place, the currency market, and we're not going to sit here and say we're currency experts or currency traders. Within investments, we try and hedge against major currencies, certainly, but for day-to-day traders, we always recommend speaking to the experts. We had a couple of pre-webinar questions around buying in Spain and what does the process look like. Now, once you've done a scouting mission, you found where you want to live, you found what house you want to buy, to take it off the market is a small deposit. Then you pay the 10% deposit, I believe. You can remind me of this, guys, and then pay the remainder of whatever's left, and minus the mortgage, I guess. But initially, prior to the scouting trip, establishing a free account with someone like Smart Currency is key. You get an appointed account manager. When the property you found and love is lined up, that initial transaction can be done in 24 hours, deposit sent, and then, in Spain, it can take, 3 to 6 months for a property to close. There's going to be a time frame. So that forward contract, as Jacob mentioned, is huge. If you're buying a €500,000 property, say, in 3 months' time, I think we did some case studies on recent swings. It could be literally 40, 50,000 euros that you miss out on. So locking in that rate is more than important. But having a currency expert is certainly key. I've waffled on about currency there. It's a bit of a minefield at the moment, to be honest. But after the meeting, we'll send over a link to open up a free smart currency account. There'll be a link. Just follow the website, and once you've registered an account, this doesn't cost anything. There's no obligation to use the account. You'll be appointed an account manager, so any sort of future transactions they'll be able to assist you with. Also really useful for ongoing pension income. Let's say you have a property investment producing money in sterling or dollars or retirement income. You need that in Spain to live. Use a currency company to do all those transactions. It can be automatic, monthly, but speak to the experts, certainly. Another question on selling a UK house. Again, that comes down to the timing and the tax planning of that, ensuring you're doing it as a UK tax resident prior to the move. So I think Elizabeth just popped a question up. What advice can you give regarding setting up a bank account in Spain whilst still living in the US, waiting for the NLV? In order to purchase Spanish private health insurance, I will need a Spanish bank account. Venetia, you deal with the initial bank accounts, NLV health insurance process?
No, they never ever need to get a different bank account. Their own bank accounts are always suitable. If they want to open a Spanish bank account, they can do, but it's not a requirement.
Okay, perfect. A couple of questions on golden visas. Jacob, we get these inquiries a lot, right? Spanish golden visa ended 2 weeks ago, did it?
I'm struggling to catch you.
Oh, I was saying I can tackle it, Remy. The Spanish golden visa did end 2 weeks ago. Unfortunately, missed the boat on that. They're leaving the door open for potential future iterations of it, but no timeline or clarity on that for now. If you are interested in the golden visa for an EU country, we have great options for Portugal, even for US citizens being able to use retirement account funds and keep those within their retirement account structure in order to pay for a golden visa, which is currently sitting at 350,000 euros with a built-in interest, a couple options that have been extremely popular. Like I said, over the last 4 months, certainly seen quite a bit of volume on those.
I think our citizenship by investment team does around 10% of the global Portuguese golden visas, and it feels like they've done hundreds in the last 4 months. But they're certainly busy. But let myself or Jacob know. We'll happily get you in touch with one of our senior partners, Mr. Jason Swan. I call him Mr. Golden Visa, but there's no one better to speak to around options, not only in Portugal but elsewhere. It allows you the quickest way, I think, to get an EU passport and allows you to cross the border to Spain and the Schengen. So certainly a great option. Last sort of questions were on annuities. I think we covered those off quite well. Any comments, guys? I think we've pretty much covered what we need to.
No.
All good?
I would say, as far as annuities go, I actually, I'm looking at a proposal here that was already up on my screen before this, and we can really generate almost 8% of the amount that you contribute to an annuity for the rest of your life. And so, I know people play off of the 4% rule of being able to live off of that, but really creating 8% for the rest of your life is just an incredible way to generate that income to live off of and increase your standard of living.
Donald Trump puts more tariffs in, starts a World War III, your annuity is still paying 8%, right?
Exactly. Even with the stock market tanks.
I shouldn't say that out loud, should I? There's a lot going on in the markets. It's a volatile place, but another benefit of something like a zero risk annuity. But guys, we highly recommend taking us up on the offer for a free consultation. Our diaries do fill up quite busy. Benicia is extremely busy all the time, which is a good sign for business. But if you can find a time in our diary and a convenient slot, as I said, we're happy to have these initial conversations to see if and where we can help. Initially, I'm going to send an email around as a follow-up with a copy of the recording and links to our diaries anyway. Come back to us with any initial questions, but there's nothing like a one-on-one question, so we can really get into the details of your current situation and how you have your assets set up.
And look, what I can do, sorry, Remy, what I can do also is I can put up the links for the scans on my website as well, or on my Facebook, and then you can look for them there if they need to get them, if they've not got them today.
Perfect. Benicia has a very active Facebook group I think I'm part of, with some really good information. But as I said, no one better to help assist with that NLV process. Jacob there dealing with the US expats, and myself, anyone else. And look, we're here to help. If you need anything, got any questions, get in touch.